I'm going to go over how to do some long division. So this is review really from elementary school, but I know that a lot of students have forgotten how to do long division by hand without a calculator. So we're going to review that today. You should have this paper in front of you called Long Division Practice, and I'm going to go through each of the questions. So the first one, number 1, divide 1,554 by 6. So the word by, it's basically telling you that 1,554 is divided by 6. So even though I wrote the word by, you can just substitute in the division sign. And so now, how do we set this up? You can also write it like this. Like that. That's also the correct way to do it. And so some of the problems that you see in the AP test will have it in this form here. And a lot of them are word problems too. So you have to figure out what to divide by what. So now I'm going to go ahead and set up the problem. And so for our long division, we're going to have 6 on the outside and 1,554 on the inside. And if you can't remember which one goes where, I have heard this story from students before. So if we say that this is a man riding on his horse, so the man is sitting on top of the horse, or the person, we'll say man or woman, the person is on top of the horse, and when they get home, the horse stays outside while the person goes inside the house. And so you can pretend that this is a house. And so that's one way that people have told me that their elementary school teachers have instructed them on how to remember which one goes where. So whatever works for you, you may have another method, and again, you want to use what works for you. So now let's go ahead and solve this problem here. And so I have 6 going into 1,554. So now I'm going to look, and 6 does not go into 1, but it does go into 15, and it goes in twice. So I'm going to put my 2 above the 5 because I looked at this whole number here, 15. And so I know it goes in twice because 6 times 2 is 12. So I'm going to put a 12 here, and I'm going to subtract. And my remainder is 3. Now in our class, we don't have remainders because almost everything divides evenly, or we round, and so we want a decimal. We don't use remainders and we don't use fractions, we use decimals. Alright, so 6 does not go into 3, but remember in long division we're going to drop this 5 down here. And 6 goes into 35 5 times, so I'm going to put the 5 here above the other 5. And 5 times 6 is 30. So remember, you multiply this number by that number, and I'm going to get 30 here. And so I'm going to subtract, and I'm going to get 5, and I'm going to drop the 4 down. Now 6 goes into 54. It goes in evenly at 9 times. So this one is nice. It goes in evenly, and so my answer to number 1 is 259. All right, so going back to number 2, divide 10,272 by 12. So I'm going to set up my problem, and 12 goes into 10,272. So it doesn't go into, so 12 does not go into 10, so I need to look at 102. And on the AP test, you might not remember, you might have to try out, let's see, well maybe it goes in 7 times. So on the side, remember you can do scratch math on the side of your problems, and you can figure it out. It actually goes in 8 times. So now I'm going to change this to an 8, and I'm going to, over here, do my scratch math. So 12 times 8 is 96, so I'm going to carefully line up my numbers, and I'm going to subtract. So my remainder is 6. I'm going to drop this down here. And 12 goes into 67 5 times. And so 5 times 12, if I don't remember that, I'm going to go ahead and do that over here on the side, is 60. I'm going to drop this number down. And 12 goes into 72, oh, one more time, so that's 12 times 6. Again, if you need to do your math to the side, just to double check, you can. But it goes evenly at 6. So my answer to number 2 is 856. Let's go on to number 3. Number 3 says divide 2,000 by 40,000. So a lot of times my students want to do this. They always want to take the smaller number and put it into the larger number. And that would be wonderful if this happened, because this would be a much easier problem. But that's not what the problem says. It says to divide 20,000 by 40,000. So this is wrong. Don't always think that the smaller number goes into the bigger number. And in fact, in APES, it usually, or often, I'll say, it often does not, especially when we're working with population math and we want to get a decimal. So one of the things that you can reduce or do, one easy trick, is to reduce our zeros. So it says 2,000 divided by 40,000. So one of the tricks that is taught is that you can remove the same number of zeros on the top and the bottom. So I can't remove all the zeros. If I removed all the zeros, it would be wrong. So if I just did this and this and I got 2 divided by 4, that is wrong. So you can't do that. So I'm going to make sure that I do the same number on the top and the bottom. So the max I can do is 3 here and then 3 here. And so now my problem is simplified. I have 2 going into 40. And that's much easier to solve than 2,000 going into 40,000. I'm sorry, 40,000. Oh, look at me. I did the wrong thing, just like some students do. I did it wrong. So let me correct it. It's like this. All right, I hope you caught that before me. So now I'm going to make sure I know where my decimal is. Remember, the decimal's at the end unless it's given. If you see the decimal, that's where the decimal is. But in this case, the decimal wasn't there, so we're going to add it at the end of the problem. And I'm going to bring up the decimal here to the top. So now 40 doesn't go into 2. So now I'm going to add a 0 here. 40 does not go into 20, so I'm going to add 1 here and 1 here. Now 40 goes into 200. It goes in 5 times, and it goes in evenly. And so my answer is 0.05. I'm going to show you a common mistake I've seen from students over the years for the problem. And when we do population math, you'll practice with these quite a lot. So they start here, and then they are like, oh, it doesn't go in, so I'm going to add a 0 here and here. And then, oh, it doesn't go in, so I'm going to add a 0 here and here. Oh, now it goes in 5 times. That is wrong. So let me back up and just go over that again just to make sure you understand. The problem with this one is that when you add a 0, you do not put 1 here unless, oh, automatically. So the zeros don't match on the top and the bottom. So see, you have this matching. That is wrong. If you notice, the correct way, the top has 1 more 0 than the bottom. And so this is not correct right there. So I'm going to go ahead and erase this. And now let's talk about where to go from here. So 40 does not go into 20, so now I can put a 0 here and here. And so notice that there's more here than on this side. And then that's how you solve it. So be careful on these problems. And again, I've seen this mistake a lot from my students. Let's go on to let's go on to number 4. Divide 5,786 by 3.4. So when you divide with decimals, it's a little bit tricky. Well, just a little bit, not much. It's okay to have the decimal over here, but it's not okay to have the decimal there. You need to get rid of it. So the way that you're going to get rid of it is you're going to move it to the end, and you're going to count how many spaces it took to move to the end. It took 1 jump to move to the end of the number. And so that means on this side, you also have to jump it 1 space, 1 here. I didn't just jump it to the end. What I did was I jumped it the number of spaces on both sides, which happened to also be the end of this number, but that's not how you do it. You don't just move them to the end. On this one, you move it to the end, but you count the number of jumps. And on this side, you count it the same number of jumps. So now I can set up my problem again without the decimals. And just a reminder, the decimal issue is only the problem here. On this side, it can have decimals. It's not a big deal. So you don't need to remove them if they're only on this side. But if they're on this side, you have to jump over here, and you have to jump over on the other side as well. So now I can divide, and it looks like 34 goes into 57 once. And I can subtract, and I'm going to get 23. I'm going to bring down the 8. Now this one I'm going to have to play around with a little bit to see how many times it goes in. And so play around with maybe 5 or 6 or 7 times 34. And I played around with it earlier, and I found that it goes in 238 times evenly. Okay, beautiful. So this goes in evenly, and I'm going to subtract and get 0. So now what do? Well, I've still got the rest of this number, and so I can drop down the 6. All right, 34 does not go into 6, so I'm going to add my 0 here, and I'm going to drop down the 8. 34 goes into 68 twice. And so that's how you do that type of problem. And so the answer is 1702. And number 5. Divide 26.208 by 0.3. All right, so here's another one of these decimal issues. So because it's on this side, I've got to remove it 1 spot. So I'm going to hop it to the end, and now 1 spot to here. Remember, you have to hop it only the same number. So here's my decimal here now. Notice I did not move it all the way to the end. That would have been wrong. So again, don't move it all the way to the end. That is incorrect. You move it the same spaces. And I only say these things because these are common mistakes that students make. All right, so now I'm going to divide. So 3 goes into 26 8 times. 8 times 3 is 24. Subtract, bring down the 2. 3 goes into 22 7 times. 7 times 3 is 21. Subtract. All right, so here's my decimal. Make sure that wherever the decimal is, you bring it up. Don't forget it. I'm going to subtract and get 1. I'm going to bring down the 0. 3 goes into 10 3 times. 3 times 3 is 9. Subtract, bring down the 8, and 3 goes into 18. It goes in 6 times evenly. So my answer is 87.36. All right, number 6. Divide 32 by 160. So again, this is one where the larger number goes into the smaller number. So here's my decimal. I'm going to bring it up. Now, 160 does not go into 32, so now I'm going to add a 0. And 160 does go into 320. It goes in twice evenly. So that one was pretty quick and easy. All right. All right, number 7. If the total number of books checked out of the library at Saugus High is 14,400 and the student population is about 2,400, how many books on average does each student have? So you need to divide, but which way to divide? Well, it wouldn't make sense for the students to have 0.1 book per person, although that could happen, really. So in our case, we're going to take the student population and we're going to divide it, we're going to take the number of books, so this is the books, and we're going to divide it by 2,400 persons. So now I'm going to take the same trick where I can knock out the same number of zeros here and the same number of zeros here. And now that's made a nicer looking number to divide. So 24 goes into 144. It goes in 6 times evenly. And I can check that it goes in 6 times evenly over here. All right, so now I know my answer is right. So on the APES test, they will not just give you simple problems like 1 through 6. They will use word problems. Going on to number 8. Mrs. Schertz's electric bill for the month of February showed a total of 646 kilowatt hours used by her family of 4. How many kilowatt hours per person, which is per capita? So the AP test will use the words per capita, so you need to know that that means per person. So I have a total of 646 kilowatt hours divided by 4 people in my family. And so I'm going to just solve this long division problem. And again, on the AP test, so many times they divide evenly, which is super nice. Now for this one, it doesn't quite divide evenly, but I'm going to add a decimal. I'm going to add a 0, and I'm going to bring down the 0. And so now 4 goes into 20. Oh, don't forget my decimal up top. It goes in 5 times evenly. So it's 161.5 kilowatt hours per person. Whenever you have an FRQ, you have to make sure you have your units in your work and in your answer. On a multiple choice, they don't check your work, so you don't need the units. But the units are helpful to make sure that you're on the right track. All right, number 9. The electric bill totaled $193.80 for that month. How much money did each kilowatt hour cost? So I need to look at the previous problem, and I see that it was 646 kilowatt hours. Okay, so my total bill was $193.80, and it was divided by 646 kilowatt hours. I do it like this because the question asks how much money per, and when you see the word per, you can draw a line, per kilowatt hours. And so I looked at what it was asking, and it wanted something in this form, so it told me I should write it like this. So if you're not sure which way to write it, like some people wouldn't know, well, many students wouldn't know which way to do it. And so one of the things you can do is look at your answers too, because kilowatt hours, now you don't know this yet, but you will. Kilowatt hours are somewhere between 10 cents to about 40 cents. And so if I did it this way here, I would get about $3 per kilowatt hour. And that would be wrong because electricity is not that expensive. Otherwise, we would all go broke. It'd be like $1,000 bill. So this is the wrong way to do it. So one of the ways you can check and figure out which way to set up your problem is to realize that when they're asking for kilowatt hours, the numbers need to be small decimals. And also check the way that they're asking. So again, the problem said how much money per, and when you see the word per, you can make a line, kilowatt hour. And so we want to make sure that our problem comes out that way. So now I can divide. Let me just go ahead and rewrite the answer, or rewrite the question this way. And that looks like an ugly math problem, like you couldn't do it without a calculator. But watch this. Let's see. 646, it might go in twice, it might go in 3 times or 4 times. And I'm going to guess 3 times. So let me check it. Off to the side. Oh my goodness, it divides evenly. So it goes in once. I'm sorry, 3 times. Hello, 3 times. And it goes in evenly. So then, but I still have this 0 here. And so I can add this 0 up here. So my answer is, in dollars, 30 cents per kilowatt hour. And that's really what a normal electricity bill is. It's not in the dollar range. You want it in the cents, so 30 cents. Number 10, Mrs. Schertz's Honda Civic can go 348 miles on average before it runs out of gas. Her tank holds 12 gallons of gas. What's her car's miles per gallon? So MPG, remember, you can take the answer and go miles per, I can draw a line, miles per gallon. Okay, so that helps me figure out which number goes where. So now I can take 348 and I can divide it by 12 gallons. And so I'm going to end up with miles over gallons. And when I do that problem, this goes in twice. So 12, let me try it by 9. Oh, it goes in evenly, so it is 29. And again, on the AP test, because you don't have a calculator, your numbers should divide pretty nicely for you. And that's how you practice and review long division.